She spat out a tooth, wiped the blood from her lip, and smiled up at the 7-foot alien pointing a plasma rifle at her chest. Then she whispered, just loud enough for his helmet MIC to catch, "You better hope I die easy." Seconds later, the ridge beneath them exploded. It hadn't started that way. The Cinder tracking unit had been so sure of themselves when they locked onto her heat signature, just one human, limping, barely armed, headed west through the fractured pine woods of Earth's western post-collapse zones. They'd been told she was a smuggler, maybe a rebel courier. Not military. Definitely not trained. Not with how she was moving. Not with how sloppily she left the fire pit smoldering. The younger recruits joked over the comms that this would be a quick collar, a live target retrieval, something easy to impress the Dominion backers. But by the time the fifth one stepped on a pressure trigger disguised as a pinecone, they had stopped joking. The trees were oddly quiet. No birds, no animals, just the low whine of alien scanners. Something was off, but the commander kept pushing. He was tall, metallic blue-skinned, with a mask that pulsed data into his second eyelids. Cold. Calculated. The kind who didn't like being corrected. He kept saying the woman was leaking infrared. Wounded. Weak. Isolate her from the trees and neutralize. She had been watching them from above for 2 hours. From a hollowed-out tree nearly 15 feet up, the woman lay motionless in her ghillie wrap, barely blinking. She knew the Cinder armor was built for impact resistance, not upward threat scans. It made them cocky, made them loud. A whisper of movement brought her attention to the right. Another pair, breaking off from the main group, scanning low and wide. They moved like they expected to find her cowering, panicking. She grinned, showing cracked molars and a blood crust where her helmet had split during the crash 3 nights ago. She'd been running since then. But not away. She had already mapped this whole canyon. This was her playground. Below, the rookie tapped something on his HUD. Thermal hit. 20 meters that way. The commander gave a signal, and 4 of them closed in fast, rifles up, feet crunching through fallen debris. She slipped downward from the tree, silent as a ghost, landing in wet moss behind them. 1 turn, 1 broken branch. That's all it would have taken. But she let them pass. Let them feel safe. She counted down in her head. 5, 4, 3, 2. A boom thundered through the trees, followed by the shriek of an energy field collapsing. Screaming. One of the Cinder got pulled into the air by a makeshift snare lined with jagged barbed wire. Another vanished into a sinkhole, covered in netting and bait. They hadn't realized this wasn't just a forest. This was her web. Every rock, every stump, was a decision she'd made days ago, maybe weeks. The Cinder were fast. But she was patient. As the chaos settled, the commander's voice buzzed sharp through their internal comms. "We are not dealing with a courier." She moved again, fast this time, sprinting low across a fallen log and vanishing into the underbrush. She dropped a bundle of scorched leaves behind her, smoke bomb mix. It wouldn't stop them long, but it would piss them off. They like clean kills. This was dirty. She slid down a ravine and into a stream bed, letting the cold water rinse off the worst of the blood. Her side throbbed where the crash shrapnel had clipped her rib. She hadn't had time to dress it right, just wrapped it in fabric stripped from a broken seat harness. Still, the adrenaline kept her upright. Her name was Maddox. That's all she gave now. No rank. No unit. No call sign. The Cinder wouldn't understand them anyway. Back in the tree line, one of the surviving Cinder ripped off his helmet. His face was smeared in soot and moss. "She's baiting us. This is a trap." "She's a human. A single woman," the commander snapped. "You think she built this alone?" The rookie hesitated. "Commander, I think we hunted the wrong one." He didn't get a response. The hunt pressed deeper into the woods, every step forward louder, angrier. Maddox was counting on that. She needed them noisy. She needed them off balance. She knew Cinder pride. She'd studied it, fought it, broken it once before. The last time she'd faced them, she hadn't walked away clean, but she had walked away. She reached the ridge. The ledge overlooked the path they'd have to take to flank her, assuming they were still using logic. She planted 3 makeshift clay charges along the shale line, just below the surface. Then, without pausing, She rigged a shortwave receiver to her old dog tags and dropped them on the center rock. It was stupid. Reckless. Bait. But they'd chase an aim. She took the high trail and waited. When the commander's boots echoed on the stone trail below, he barely glanced at the tags before scoffing. A relic. Who wears these anymore? The rookie knelt, squinting. Wait. Sir, these are Earth forces. But the back. That's when the ridge cracked. The explosion ripped the slope in half. Rocks crashed down, cinder scattered, and Maddox watched from above, cold and unmoving, as the commander crawled from the debris, helmet cracked, chest plate dented. His rifle sparked. His pride smoldered. She called down to him, voice calm, almost amused. You came all this way to catch me. Shame you didn't read the back of the tags first. He looked up, blinking dust from his second eyelid. She vanished into the smoke. The smoke lingered in the valley like a ghost that refused to leave. The commander emerged coughing, gripping the edge of a charred rock. His armor scotched and cracked along the left shoulder. His squad was scattered. 2 injured, 1 unconscious, 1 missing entirely. Their tracking systems were scrambled, heat signatures distorted, and the air was thick with interference. It didn't make sense. One human woman with scavenged supplies wasn't supposed to be capable of this. He scanned the terrain, but every path had become a question mark. No clear direction, no safe option. And yet he knew, deep in his gut, she was close. Watching. Waiting. Maddox didn't run far after the explosion. That was never the plan. She circled high on the ridge, using the terrain to her advantage. The Cinder didn't understand how many of their advantages were useless here. Their helmets were designed for open plains or clean interior environments, not unstable mountain biomes. Their armor, built for blast resistance, made them heavy in wet terrain. And worst of all, their minds were trained for precision, not chaos. She didn't need to outrun them. She just needed to make them chase her on her terms. The trail narrowed ahead, winding through a canyon choked with collapsed trees and old mining debris. Maddox moved fast and low, passing landmarks she knew by heart. A half-buried generator hummed softly behind a tangle of roots. A rusted cable spool, still held together with ancient wire mesh. She slowed, crouched by a moss-covered boulder, and reached into a crevice. Her fingers found the cold metal of a cash box. Inside was a hand-soldered radio beacon, wrapped in foil to hide its signal until needed. She twisted the frequency dial and set it to ping once every 30 seconds, just enough to throw off Cinder pursuit algorithms. Back where the squad was regrouping, a different kind of frustration took hold. The rookie, helmet off and face smudged with blood, paced in tight circles. He was barely out of cadet trials, and already he'd seen 2 of his mentors taken out by tree traps and what appeared to be low-grade explosives rigged with alarm clock guts. He didn't understand how Earth survivors had adapted like this. He'd expected caves and campfires, not spring-loaded hunting gear and proximity mines built from trash. The others were quieter now. No more bravado. The one with the broken visor hadn't spoken at all since he was pulled from the landslide. His hand wouldn't stop shaking. The commander issued a perimeter hold and stepped away to recalibrate his suit's internal systems. Static kept breaking across his visor feed, and every time he tried accessing high orbit support, the signal cut out mid-transmission. He suspected jamming. But by who? No Earth militia was known to be operating this deep in the black zones, and the colonies were too fragmented to fund insurgents. This woman, she was something else. Something he wasn't briefed on. The dog tags weren't a trophy. They were a warning. A warning he didn't read until it was already too late. Maddox, meanwhile, had reached the outer ridge bunker. It wasn't much, just a collapsed relay station reinforced with stone and whatever scrap she could weld into shape. Inside, dim yellow lights flickered against the old steel walls. The air smelled of dust, rust, and ozone. She pulled off a makeshift poncho, revealing the bruises on her arms and the long cut down her left side. She didn't flinch as she poured antiseptic over it. Pain had long since been filed away as background noise. She sat at the terminal, flipping switches until the ancient screen sparked to life. The welcome message blinked once, then disappeared behind a menu written in Oath military shorthand. She typed in a 10-digit access code, one she hadn't used in 6 years. The screen shifted. A voice filter activated. Earth Command Secure Node 7. Signal dormant. Do you wish to reactivate emergency alert protocol? She paused, then tapped no. She wasn't calling for help. Not yet. This was personal. On a shelf above the console sat a cracked picture frame. It held a faded image of a squad, 5 people, all in uniform, standing in a dust-stormed desert, all smiling. Maddox stared at it for a moment, then set it face down. 4 of them were dead. 1 had betrayed her. The Cinder may have thought this was just another retrieval mission, but for her, this canyon was more than a hideout. It was a graveyard. And today, it would be filled again. Outside, the wind picked up. Maddox slung a compact rifle across her shoulder and checked the pulse charges lining the doorway. They weren't much, but they'd give her enough of a cue if someone breached her outer perimeter. She left the bunker and disappeared into the tree line again. Time to lead them deeper. The Cinder Squad was moving again, slower this time. Wiser. They were watching every tree, scanning every bush. But Maddox had already planned for that. She left behind audio lures, recordings of footsteps and faint human breathing. She'd ripped the sounds from old logs and looped them through directional speakers mounted in hollow trunks. One Cinder fired at the sound of a branch snap. Nothing. Just static. The rookie glanced toward a rock ledge and saw a brief flash of movement. He motioned to his commander, then climbed up slowly. When he reached the top, all he found was a small tin can on a string, spinning in the wind. The moment his boot touched the ground, the trap activated. A thick cord snapped around his ankle and yanked him upside down. Before he could even scream, a net fell over his torso, pinning his arms. He dangled there, face red, kicking, humiliated. The commander approached and slashed the rope with a plasma blade, letting the rookie drop hard onto the dirt. The message was clear. This wasn't war. This was theater. And they were being played. Then came the voice. No distortion. No comms interference. Just clear, dry, from the forest ahead. You're not hunters anymore. They froze. The rookie spun in circles, trying to locate the sound. Your quarry. Learn the difference. Silence. The commander clenched his jaw and ordered a full sweep. But part of him already knew they were too late. This wasn't just about capturing a target anymore. This was about surviving her long enough to make it back to orbit. Maddox watched them scatter again. She sat atop a tree with a cracked scope, sipping water from a rusted canteen, eyes fixed on the commander. They thought Earth was broken, that its people had been reduced to shadows. But Earth still had its ghosts. And some of them knew how to fight. Night fell hard in the canyon. The clouds hung low, trapping the darkness under their belly, making every tree branch feel like a limb ready to strike. The Cinder Squad, now reduced to 4 shaken members, had set up a defensive ring near a dried-out creek. Their tech glowed faintly, a blue haze against the black woods, but even that felt like a mistake. Light meant visibility. Visibility meant death. No one said it, but every one of them was thinking it. She was still out there. And now, worse than before, they couldn't hear her. No traps, no voices, no tricks. Just silence. The kind that made you imagine things. The commander crouched near the map projection on his forearm, the terrain glitching every few seconds as Maddox's interference pulses disrupted the satellites above. He had sent the request for reinforcements 3 times. Each time it had been scrambled. The only reply that had come through was a short phrase from an orbital relay that didn't make sense. It simply said, "Do not engage." No explanation. Just that. He considered whether to retreat, to cut losses, but something kept him locked in place. Pride maybe, or fear of what the report would look like if they failed. Either way, the idea of turning back didn't sit well. He wasn't just tracking a fugitive now. He was trying to make sense of a myth. About 100 meters away, Maddox lay belly down on a slope covered in frostbitten moss. Her rifle was cradled in her arms, but she hadn't moved a finger to the trigger. Not yet. She wasn't going to pick them off one by one. Not like a sniper. That wasn't the point of this. She needed them to feel the weight of the mistake they had made. She needed them to understand exactly who they had tried to capture. And for that, they had to see the truth themselves. As the hours passed, fatigue began to peel away the last bits of discipline the Cinder had. One fell asleep sitting upright, visor on standby. Another kept muttering to himself, whispering the same phrase in their native language over and over. The rookie paced, then stopped, then started pacing again. He wasn't holding his weapon right anymore. His grip had relaxed, his awareness dulled. That was when she moved. The bunker was her next destination. Not the makeshift one from earlier, but the old one. The real one. Buried under earth and vines, sealed off by rust and secrets. She had locked it years ago. After the betrayal. After her team was gone. She had sworn she'd never come back, but that promise meant less with each cinder step on her land. The entrance was hidden beneath a collapsed tower structure, and she had to dig under a fallen antenna mast to reach the panel. When the code screen lit up, she didn't hesitate. 10 numbers. The same ones etched into her dog tags. The lock released with a hiss. Inside, it was frozen in time. Dust thick in the air. Terminals blank. Weapons crates sealed and forgotten. And in the corner, the coat. Her old field cloak, stitched with the insignia of Project Phantom. The symbol that had once made enemies flee. She touched it like it might still be alive. Then she pulled it on. She walked down a hallway of memories, passing old bunks, empty ration shelves, and a cracked mirror. She didn't look at herself in it. She didn't need to. At the end of the corridor, she reached the vault. A biometric scanner blinked red, then green. The door unsealed. Inside were records, documents, audio logs. All of it left behind in a rush the day the mission was scrubbed. The Cinder hadn't just chased the wrong woman. They had stepped into a forgotten battlefield that still had a soldier in it. Back outside, one of the Cinder spotted movement in the distance. A soft glint near the tree line. He raised his rifle and pointed, calling out quietly to the commander. But when they scanned the zone, there was nothing. Just a rope hanging from a branch. Tied to it were dog tags. Real ones. Clean. Untouched. They shimmered in the wind. The commander approached, hand steady. The moment he touched them, a data spike activated, and his helmet screen flooded with images. Tactical video files. Bodycam footage. Combat reports. Earth soldiers in black armor taking down entire alien drop squads. One woman among them moved faster than the rest. Silent. Efficient. A ghost. She wasn't tagged in the files. Just listed as Operative 0. But the face was Clay. Maddox. He yanked the helmet off and turned toward the forest. "Who is she?" he demanded. The rookie looked at him, eyes wide. "We hunted a human ghost." The response was meant to be dramatic. But what followed was worse. A deep rumble in the earth. Then a whir. A rising mechanical hum that hadn't been heard in decades. From behind the ridge, the old comms tower activated. Its power grid, restored by Maddox earlier in the day, surged with new life. Antennas rotated. A beacon flashed once, twice, then began broadcasting. The signal was old Earth military encryption, unbreakable by modern Cinder code breakers. But the message was short enough to translate. Target acquired. Do not approach. Phantom unit active. Stand down. All across the squad systems, warning lights began flashing. Maddox was already moving again. She wasn't going to fight them here. Not directly. That wasn't her style anymore. She needed them to carry this fear back to their command. To whisper her name to people who thought Earth was docile. That's how the real war began. One myth, one mistake, one survivor who refused to die quietly. The forest swallowed her again, and this time, they didn't chase. The next morning came, without a sunrise. The clouds had thickened, ash-gray and suffocating, sealing the valley in a dull light that felt like the world had forgotten how to wake up. The Cinder squad stood at half-strength, and none of them was speaking. The night had changed something. What had started as a retrieval had transformed into a reckoning. They had crossed paths with a ghost, but unlike their superstitions and scanned war records, this ghost bled, set traps, rewired bunkers, and activated dead satellites with nothing but grit and an old blood oath. And now she had turned their mission into her stage. The commander stared at the message, still looping across his cracked helmet screen. Do not approach. Phantom unit active. Stand down. He had tried disabling the signal, rerouting it, even destroying the beacon itself, but the relay had been reconfigured to bounce the broadcast between the old grid towers buried in the canyon. He couldn't stop it. Weiss, the signal was climbing in strength, now strong enough to reach low orbit. It meant one thing. Someone up there now knew they had failed. That they had poked at something Earth hadn't wanted disturbed. Maddox watched from a hollow above the tree line, chewing on a ration bar that tasted like wax and rust. Her muscles were sore, her side ached, and her breathing was slower now, but the mission wasn't done. Not until the last of them understood who they had followed into this place. She tightened the strap on her cloak and adjusted the modified pulse rifle on her back. Her weapons weren't fancy. Nothing about her loadout screamed elite. But every piece had history. Every dent and scratch had been earned. The only thing untouched were her dog tags, which she now wore tucked beneath her shirt, away from view. She didn't need to show them anymore. The message had already been delivered. Down in the camp, the youngest soldier finally cracked. He began speaking rapidly in his native tongue, motioning to the trees and rocks like they were haunted. He'd seen her eyes, he said, glowing in the dark. He swore she didn't make sound when she moved, that she had left no tracks in the snow. The others didn't argue. They had stopped arguing hours ago. The line between legend and memory had already blurred. The commander silenced him with a sharp gesture, but his own hands betrayed him. They trembled slightly when he reached for his weapon. They began to move again, desperate now, scanning every surface like the trees themselves might attack. They moved uphill, toward higher ground, believing it would give them the advantage. Maddox had counted on this. The high ridge path funneled them into a narrow stone corridor, flanked on both sides by sheer drops. To a tactician, it looked like a natural choke point. To Maddox, it was the final stage. She had rigged it days earlier, before she even knew anyone was coming. A habit born from experience. Boredom, she called it then. Now it was destiny. Under the stones were wire charges, powered by a salvage generator pulled from a mining outpost a mile away. She had connected the detonators to a simple pressure relay hidden beneath a moss-covered rock on the far side. And she knew exactly how many footsteps it would take the commander to reach it. She didn't detonate immediately. She waited until they were halfway across. Let them feel the false sense of progress. Let them feel hope. When the last of them reached the center, she whispered to herself, 3, 2, 1. The ridge erupted in a flash of white heat and thunder. Rocks screamed as they shattered apart. One cinder was thrown off the edge, disappearing into the canyon below. The others scattered, but there was no cover, no time. The commander managed to roll into a hollow, his leg bleeding from a shot that had pierced his thigh. He pulled out a field injector and stabbed it into the wound, breathing in gasps, more animal than soldier now. Maddox moved fast, emerging from the tree line like smoke given form. Her silhouette flickered in the dust, stepping over fallen stones with quiet purpose. She didn't shout. She didn't aim. She just walked, boots crunching in slow rhythm. The rookie saw her first. He raised his rifle, but his hand shook too hard to steady the aim. She stopped just 10 feet away, her eyes locked on the commander. He tried to rise but collapsed again, leg useless. He reached for his sidearm, but Maddox was already there. She kicked it away, then crouched beside him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she reached into her cloak and pulled out a worn metal box. She opened it slowly, revealing a small projector cube. She tapped it once, and it hummed to life, displaying an image mid-air. It was a Cinder operation log, dated 6 years ago. Location matched Earth's black zone, where Project Phantom last operated. The footage showed Cinder units ambushing an Earth Recon team under false flag terms. One by one, they were executed. The last to fall was a woman dragged into a trench. The footage cut before the end, but her face had already been identified. Maddox. Betrayed, left for dead, and marked as deceased by her own command to avoid a political standoff. The commander looked at the image, then at her, and something shifted in his face. Realization. Not just who she was, but why she had survived. Why she had returned. She leaned closer and whispered something he would never repeat. Then she stood and walked away, leaving him alive but broken. The remaining soldier dropped his weapon. He wasn't ordered to. He just did. Some line had been crossed. Some rule of war or honor or fear. Maddox didn't look back. She vanished into the fog as fast as she had appeared, her cloak catching the wind. By the time the rescue dropship arrived 2 hours later, the Cinder Squad was found dazed and silent. They refused to speak to the retrieval officers. Their footage was corrupted. Their equipment fried. All they handed over was a single chain of dog tags, set gently in the center of their campfire like an offering. The officers asked for a name. The commander gave none. He just said, "We hunted a woman who was already dead. And she showed us what that means." The Cinder commander was never the same after that mission. They said he returned to his vessel with a limp, even though medical scans found no structural damage in his leg. They said he refused to speak for 3 full rotations, not even to his superiors, and when he finally did, all he said was that they had seen something they should not have touched. His report was buried in layers of redacted code. High Command refused to circulate it among the rest of the fleet. They were too afraid of what it might inspire. Fear. Doubt. The idea that Earth still had monsters of its own. And worse, that those monsters had names, tags, and unfinished wars. Far below, in the canyons the Cinder dared not return to, Maddox stood alone in the bunker's northern wing, staring out through a cracked viewing panel. The forest was quiet again. The traps had been disarmed. The remaining gear reburied. Her cloak hung loosely on her shoulders, rainwater dripping down its frayed edges. The adrenaline had left her body hours ago. What remained was the heaviness. Not regret. Not sorrow. Something more primal. The ache that follows survival. She had not set out to kill them. But they would have died if she had wanted it. That was the real message. That the choice was hers. She walked down the corridor, boots echoing in the half-lit steel hall, and entered the last sealed room she had never opened since the betrayal. Inside were 5 lockers, each marked with an old project insignia. Phantom Unit. She opened one, slowly, and took out a single field box. Inside it were 5 pairs of dog tags. She ran her fingers across each one. These were the people who had gone silent when the Cinder turned. The people who had been left with her in that valley to die. She had carried their memories in her bones. Now, she placed each tag in the box with her own and closed it. She carried the box to the surface. Outside, the rain had slowed, mist floating between the trees like breath from sleeping giants. She found the tallest tree at the center of the clearing and buried the box beneath its roots. No ceremony. No words. Just weight into earth. Then she stood back and looked around. Nothing but green and silence. This was where it would end. The fight. The hunt. The waiting. They knew now. The Cinder would hesitate. They would mark this zone as red. Avoid it. Whisper stories about the woman who turned terrain into weapons and ghosts into warnings. But Maddox knew better. Stories weren't for them. They were for the next ones. The next fool who thought Earth was broken and empty. The next fleet who thought domination was just a scan and a squad away. She left behind no trails, no beacons. Just absence. And absence would speak louder than blood. Back in orbit, the recovery officer reviewing the salvaged equipment from the failed mission noticed something strange in the final data logs. There were no video feeds of the woman's face, no confirmed identifications, no timestamps matching known Earth operatives. Every time a recording was captured, it was scrambled moments later by a burst of magnetic interference. No visual. No voiceprint. Just fragments. The only thing recovered in full was the dog tag. Maddox, No rank. No call sign. Just a serial number too old to trace and a unit listed as terminated. The officer flagged it, then paused. He hovered over the delete option for a moment, then instead transferred the file into a private archive and locked it under a non-operational classification. It was safer that way. Let ghosts be ghosts. Let the myth live in the dark, where it would keep others from ever following the same path. Maddox wandered through the woods until the night came again. No more traps to reset. No more syndicates to track. The bunker door had sealed behind her for the last time. She had no intention of returning. Some scars needed to be left buried. Her steps were slow, but certain. Her breath came easier now. Her weapon holstered, unused. The valley stretched wide ahead of her, and somewhere beyond it, the sky began to clay. Just a sliver. Just enough. She reached a ridgeline where the trees broke and looked down into the basin below. Nothing but stone, mist, and silence. She sat down on the edge, pulled out her last ration bar, and bit into it with a faint grimace. Still tasted like metal and cardboard. She leaned back, using her pack as a pillow, and stared up at the stars through a break in the canopy. Somewhere up there, the Cinder Fleet was licking its wounds, rewriting its maps, redrawing its caution zones. She had changed something, even if no one ever saw it. Even if her name never reached another Earth registry. She smiled once, just a flicker. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't peace. It was the realization that they had hunted her like prey, only to find themselves beneath the heel of a war they never understood. They had come for a ghost. And they left haunted. Hours later, a Cinder drone hovered just beyond the tree line. Small, silent, scanning for motion. It drifted forward slowly, cameras whirring. When it reached the ridge, it spotted the clearing and hovered in place, running scans. The ground was empty. No fires. No bodies. Just a field, a tree, and a pile of freshly turned earth at the base of its roots. The drone paused, then turned to leave. Before it did, its camera lens caught one last frame. A rusted helmet nailed to a tree trunk. Hanging from it were 5 dog tags. And beside them, a 6th tag glinting in the dawn light. Maddox, ah. The drone's return data feed went dark moments later. No warning. Just silence. The Cinder never sent another after it. In time, the stories began to circulate again. Among smugglers, rebel cells, off-grid settlers, and even deep space traders. Stories of a woman who didn't die. A woman who walked out of the woods with shadows behind her and left entire hunting parties broken without firing a single clean shot. Some said she was ex-military. Others said she was something older, something the Earth buried in its last war and forgot. But the one thing all the stories agreed on was that she always left a single sign behind. Dog tags. Real ones. Human. Marked and worn. And when someone asked what her code name had been, the answer was always the same. She didn't have one. She was the warning.